Right, Amanda, what are we doing today?
We're doing Reading in Bed, episode 52, I think it is.
It sounds about right, doesn't it? So, yeah, as you can tell, obviously, like everybody, I perform for you. I'm Andy N. She is.
Amanda Nicholson.
Yeah, now, obviously, with Reading in Bed, we're going to double check. We've had confusion in this before, Amanda, haven't we? So I've gone along and numbered it wrong. Yeah, but it's definitely episode 52 this month, okay?
Yeah, by the time this comes out, it'll probably be 5 foot of snow.
Oh, don't start that. Don't start that. Don't start that. I've had that before in snow. So people obviously know, like, people know me and Amanda really well. We know my birthday's at the end of April. And I've had, do you remember a friend from Bognor Regis, Amanda, Andy,
Yeah.
who lived in Brighton at one point? He came to visit me, 15 years ago on my birthday, and it was on a Saturday. And he arrived, stopped at Mum and Dad's for a couple of days with me, and it started snowing. Kid you not, it started snowing on the 28th of April. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, I think I've known snow in April, but it's very rare.
It is rare, so let's hope we don't get it. So, anyway, right, before we start on the books today, news. Amanda, would you like to go first? Because you do have news.
We've been on podcasts, well, a podcast and a radio show, haven't we?
Yeah, do you want to tell people what they were?
So I've forgotten the name of the podcast now, actually.
It'll kill you. It'll kill you.
I know it's Peter Humphreys that does it, but I've forgotten the name of his podcast.
First Impressions, right? So, sorry, Peter.
Right. First Impressions, and I forgot it. That's my first impression.
I'm saying nothing, right? So, but we had a good time with Amanda, didn't we? Because we spoke to Peter, about a couple of weeks ago, was it? First week in March or something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it's just come out a couple of weeks later, and it's basically he used us podcast with one or two guests, and he had a bumper episode set up. He's got 4 poets, me, you, and I forgot the lady's name, some lady from the Ukrainian Poets Project, and our friend Lisa O'Hare, isn't it? So
yeah, and we didn't know we were sharing the episode with her, so that was a nice surprise.
It was. Lisa's great, very, very talented writer, and we had good fun doing our bits really, Amanda, weren't they? So, but yeah, and then what did we do yesterday, Amanda?
We went on Hannah Kate's bookshelf, I think it's called.
Hannah's bookshelf.
I get confused because you used to call it bookcase, and now I have to stop and question myself what it's called. When I used to know before, and now I'm thinking, does he know something I don't know?
Oh, it's Hannah's Bookshelf, okay, which is on North Manchester FM between 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. every Saturday, and it is on Mixcloud to find yesterday's show, so it's well worth watching. We had a really good laugh there yesterday, Amanda, didn't we? So
yeah,
we met. We said there was she had 12 poets on yesterday, 8 in person and 4 on. I think she's done it through Skype. She said 4 extra ones, and the 8 that were there, we knew what 2 of them, didn't we? Apart from ourselves. The lovely Paul Morrissey's wife, Judy Morrissey, were lovely to see they were again. And we met you met 4 of the poets. I knew one of them, John Darwin. And there was 3 other poets there and writers we hadn't met before. It was nice afternoon out it was. So it's well worth checking out the show, as I would say. So, right, quick bit of news from me is I've also had out this month the 5th in my Europa anti-war books with my friend Nick Ambrister, Europa 5, which you can find if you look around for it. And that was when we talked about the Afghanistan war. And we've been working on book 6 in a minute, which is about the Ukraine war. And that's going to be out fairly quickly. So we're both raging over that. Right, Amanda. Should we do our first book of the month?
Yeah.
Right. We haven't sorted an order out, have we? So, but
no.
Now, obviously, we've got to warn everybody today, if you hear this, there is going to be some quite adult material coming on later on. So what I think we'll do today, Amanda, is should we do the 2 books and anybody can listen to, can't they, first of all? So,
the nice books.
Right, we'll do mine first then, okay? I've got a sci-fi book, okay? And then Amanda's doing a poetry book in part 2. Now, parts 3, 4, and 5, we do have to warn you, they're explicit content and they're not suitable for children before we start, Amanda, are they? So,
no.
Okay, well, that being the case then, Amanda, what do you want off me first?
The title and the author.
Okay, this is a sci-fi book by an American author called Clifford D. Simak called City.
Okay, so do you want to read the blurb?
Yeah, okay. On a far future Earth, Mankind's achievements are immense. Artificially intelligent robots, genetically uplifted animals, interplanetary travel, genetic modification of the human form itself. But nothing comes without a cost. Humanity is tired, its vigour are all but gone. Society is breaking down into smaller communities, dispersing into the countryside and abandoning the great cities of the world. As the human race dwindles and declines, which of its greatest creations will inherit the earth and which will claim the stars?
Oh, so how did you discover this book then?
This has come off a couple of people actually. I had a couple of recommendations come from the same book actually the past couple of months. First of all, my friend Keelan Cody recommended this to me. He's been reading this author a lot. But Dad recommended this one to me about 2 months ago as well. And also I was chatting to this writer with our friend John Keane and Write Out Loud Stockport the other month as well. All recommended to me.
It's an interesting combination of people recommending the same book to you.
yeah, it is really. Now it's classic sci-fi, this book as well. Because to explain to you, Amanda, first of all, it shows you this. It's a series of 8 interconnected short stories that were originally between 1944 to 1951.
Yeah.
With an additional story wrote in 1971 as a tribute to his original editor, John W. Campbell. And tell me how you feel about this, Amanda, because they're 8 interconnected short stories. Apart from the last 2 stories, it's a completely different cast every time, but it's mostly on the same family, going across 10,000 years and generations.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, really, because it was the scope of it is really, really quite immense in it, because as I said before, it stretches over 10,000 years from man who abandons their homes in the cities in fear of the atomic bomb. Because you think back in the 40s and 50s, that was a big threat, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So he's wrote really reacted to that, and then base it over the future generations where most of mankind then flees to Jupiter, leaving a new world order to be established by talking dogs and their robot helpers.
Oh, okay.
It's a bit. It works, but it's a bit. You know what I mean? It's an odd one, really. Because what do you think? Do you think to that? Could you imagine that being wrote nowadays?
No, not really. But like the futuristic stuff that was written like decades ago, it's a bit more out there, I think, than the futuristic stuff that's written now. It's like when we watch Black Mirror and stuff like that, you could actually see it. But the older sort of science fiction stuff, you think, oh, that'll never happen.
Yeah, this one's very similar in some ways in that. But what I did like about it, there was a couple of really good things about the story to begin with. There was one where there was quite a lot of technology in it, but he didn't actually directly address the technology. He basically implied it a lot more. And I think that's at that stage, the technology itself was obviously they didn't know what they were going to get, say 60 years later, really, I suppose, did they? Any more than that?
No.
And then what I also particularly liked about it was whenever you see a lot of sci-fi stuff is like huge about action, about world-threatening things, isn't it? So this book was quite different. The tone of it is quite different, where it's a lot more relaxed. And also, I think as well, there's the confrontation in it is very, very different. It's told in a very, very deep, gentle leisure. And the best short stories in this book aren't with a massive explosion or twist at the end. Sometimes they leave you with a question, thinking, oh. So it's like, do you get me? Well, the tone's quite different, isn't it? So
Yeah.
That's what. But yeah, like I said before, it's worth noting that, and I've not wrote it down. It's typical, really. But where you got a stage, it's all about the same family for over 10,000 years, and by the last 2 short stories, it's by a robot descendant of one of the people, and one of the descendants comes back in briefly on the last story and the 8th story. So it's like it's a fascinating book, actually, really.
So was there any overlap then? So like in one story, they might refer to somebody from the past story, like grandma or whatever.
Yeah, they mentioned a lot of people got mentioned in it.
Yeah.
Indirectly, but I said it wasn't. They didn't directly talk about them, but what they did with each story was it moved the narrative along in a very gentle, subtle way, really, about say what happened 200-300 years later in humanity, and then base it how it's changed. And then I think it was the 3rd story, they went to Jupiter. And that's when a lot of the people started moving over to Jupiter just to escape from the Earth, because the Earth was basically a mess by that stage. So it was a fascinating book. It really, really was a fascinating book.
So is there any more good points you want to say before you move on to any bad points?
Let's have a look. No, I don't think there wasn't a lot really. But what I did want to this was, and I want to question ask you, Amanda, this, because I read it over 9 days and it's about 280 pages. It's quite a reasonably short book anyway. But what I did was I read one short story a day. And then it gave you a chance to let the book breathe more. And I think it worked really well, that. Have you ever done that, Amanda, with books that are interlinked short stories throughout the full of the book? And you just read one at a time and stop, goes another day, don't you?
I can't remember ever reading a book like that where the short stories are all linked to each other. I could be wrong, but I don't remember anything off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you read there, but as I said, it's an interesting book, this one. So, and because it's only 280 pages, it was reasonably gentle to read as well. So, but anyway, so.
Okay, so is there any bad points?
Oh yeah, well, I think the book is dated, unfortunately. When you get to a book like I said, it's 80 years old now, or nearly 80 years old, the first part of it. The way you write nowadays, it has evolved somewhat from this book, and I think the characters are a bit too thin in places, and it was dated certainly because I used the characters, and then the one mistake he did make in the book was, and in the last 2 short stories, obviously mankind's vanished. It's either died out or it's gone to Jupiter, and I'm not going to say what's happened to Jupiter, but mankind is not the same, she'll put it bluntly. And all that was left was robots, dogs, and ants, would you believe? And the ants took over the world. And I thought to myself, the ants were it was a funny one because they didn't really give much attention to the answers, so he didn't really get what their motivation was, and that was probably a mistake. But if they'd done that, it'd been another 2-3 short stories, and you know what I mean? He might have overloaded the book somewhat. So,
okay.
Also, I said before, and was the technology, like I said, is if you like, is sci-fi more technical. This isn't that sort of book, and it's also certainly not book sci-fi for people like seeing explosions and the world under threat. It's not that kind of book at all.
Yeah.
Okay, that's my comments.
Okay, so do you want to give it a mark out of 10?
What do you think I'm going to give this, Amanda?
I think you're going to recommend it. I don't know how highly.
It's an 8. I really enjoyed it. I did really enjoy it. It's one of those books where it's a quaint little book, and it's definitely dated. It's some such a book, but it's a book of somebody likes a science fiction to be more in the emotional character and about characters rather than explosions. So it's a really good book. I recommend it.
Okay.
Right, Amanda.
Shall I give some clues for my next book then?
Your first book, you mean?
Yeah. Well, the next book on here are my first book.
Yeah, go for it. What's your first book? Let me give us a clue.
There's some things I haven't told you.
Oh, I hope not. No, people that know us, we've been married for 6 months, nearly 7 months now, and it would be, wouldn't you? And we've been together 5.5 years. I hope there's something. What things man has not told me, it doesn't come from his book next. Right. Well, seriously, guys and girls, stay out, hang around. We shall see you in a minute. Say bye, Amanda.
Bye.
Reading in bed.
Hi guys, yes, Reading in Bed, episode 52. I am Andy N.
I am Amanda N.
Oh, you're Amanda N today, not Amanda Nicholson, or Amanda Steele, or Amanda C, Amanda A. I don't know. It was funny yesterday, people wondering, we were at Hannah's bookshelf thing. Didn't she introduce you correctly, Amanda, didn't she? And say she introduced you as Amanda N or Amanda C.
I think she nearly did. I think she introduced me as Amanda Steele because obviously I sort of put my name down because I've been on that show so many times now. It'd be like, who's Amanda Nicholson? It's like, no, Amanda Steele's been on there 10 million times, but not Amanda Nicholson.
Exactly, same Randy N been on a number of times as well. So, yeah. But that's anyway, so I won't show then. So, but anyway, Amanda, what is your first book of the month?
Okay, so it's called Some Things I Still Can't Tell You by Misha Collins.
Is there a blurb for this book?
Yeah. From Misha Collins, actor, longtime poet and activist, whose massive online following calls itself Army for Good, comes his debut poetry collection, Some Things I Still Can't Tell You, Trademark wit and subtle vulnerability converge in each poem. This book is both a celebration of an aspiration of life well lived. The book is a compilation of small observations and musings. It's filled with moments of reflection and a love letter to the simple joys passing a simple blade of grass on the sidewalk. The freedom of peeing outdoors late at night, or the way a hand-built ceramic mug feels when it's full of warm tea on a chilly morning. It's a catalogue and compendium that examines the complicated experience of being all too human and interacting with a complex, confounding, breath-taking world, and a reminder to stop and be awake and alive in yourself.
Interesting. Now, obviously, for people who don't know Amanda, who is Misha Collins?
Well, it says all the things that he is there, but if you want to know what he's been an actor in, the main one is Supernatural, even though he's been in quite a few other things as well, but he was in Supernatural, I think, the longest.
Yeah, he did, what was it, 12? Did he come in season 3 of Supernatural or something, didn't he?
Season 4, I think it was.
Was it season 4? Yeah. So people wondering, I said he was in it, but then obviously 11 years after that. So it was quite funny, wasn't it? Because he only meant to come in for a guest appearance for a couple of episodes, didn't he? And everybody seemed to really like him. So and he seemed to stay around then, didn't he? So
yeah,
that's why. But yeah, so no, but you told me before, Amanda, I didn't know this. Like, but you knew he'd been writing poetry before, hadn't you?
Yeah, I used to follow him obsessively on Twitter, and I knew from that he wrote poetry, but I'd never seen any of it, so I didn't know what it was like.
Right, well, that being the case, and you better give us the strengths and the weaknesses, hadn't you? So give us first of all then the strengths.
I actually liked some of the poems. They're like little sort of reflections of moments and things like that, or just like little snippets of moments and emotions. But on the other side of it, I was reading some reviews and there was people going, "Oh, that's not poetry," and it's like, I don't think we've heard people read that sort of poetry, at Speakeasy and the nights we've been to, but I think it's still classed as poetry because there's a lot of different things what poetry is. I don't think it's just one thing.
Okay, yeah, so, okay, tell us about then the structure of the book then, so for the strengths of it, and what did you really like about this book?
The physical part, well, the sort of appearance of the book actually was different because it's like, when you get a poetry book, normally, like, they'll make use of both sides of the page, won't they? And this one was, unless the page is spread onto 2 pages, if there were just one page poems, then the next page would be blank and then it'd be the poem on the next page then. So it seems to waste a lot of paper.
How big a book was it then?
Oh, I don't have it with me, but it was under 200 pages. Maybe quite a bit under that. I can't remember the exact page count, but half of it was blank pages.
No, that is a bit. I've got mixed feelings about that, to be honest with yourself. What's your impression? What do you think to that then?
I suppose if you're reading a book and you're thinking, "Oh yeah, this is going to take me however long to read," and then you think you're zooming through it because there's all the blank pages after each poem, except for the one that take up 2 pages. And I suppose you can think you're reading it faster. But on the other side of it, it's like when everyone's going on about global warming and paper and cutting down trees, it seems a bit of a waste.
Yeah, I see what you mean with that. It's a bit of a funny one, isn't it? So, yeah, so I get what you mean with that. So, now obviously, like you told me as well, didn't you, because I've not read this book. What I meant to have a look at it, and I know you've read some pieces out to me. But what do you think to the actual structure of the poems? You said some of these are more like thoughts in places, didn't you?
Yeah, there's like some little ones that are just like, such and such said this and I said that, and then I left feeling blah, 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 whatever. And it's like, I suppose it works, but I can understand on the other hand why people are going, "Oh, well, that's not a poem."
Yeah.
So I suppose poetry is whatever you want it to be, really.
Yeah, I think so as well with that. They say it's very open to interpretation, I think, the poetry a lot of the time. So, and it's like it sounds like it is with this book, definitely. So, now, is there anything else you want to talk about with this book, Amanda, before we go into weaknesses?
Yeah, the thing is, I don't know if they've done this on purpose, but it's going to make me need to read the whole thing again now, because like I told you yesterday after I finished reading it and the acknowledgements, and then it mentions that he's split with his wife. Well, they're separated, they're not divorced yet, so there's chance for them to sort things out. But I didn't know that reading it, and some of the poems I'd been reading, I was thinking, oh, they sound like they're about like an ex or something, but he's been with his wife for so long, so I don't know when he had time to like, date anybody else to write these poems about them. So now, like looking back on it and knowing that, which was at the end of the book, it's like if I go back and reread it now, it's going to have a different meaning to it going back now and rereading it.
Yeah, I found it. You said that before, man. I found it a bit odd that really because obviously we talk about obviously like he's separated from his wife, but like should you have actually put that in the back of the book? Really, I don't know. It's a funny one, isn't it? So.
Yeah, it does put everything into perspective so that I understand it more now. And I know who the poems were about because I was thinking, reading part of a poem and thinking, oh, it's about his wife. And then like it gets to the end, it sounds like these people have split up. It can't be about his wife. And then you get to the end and find out they are separated. And he never really said anything on social media about it. So he's kept it private. So I'm hoping that means that they're going to get back together again because I've seen pictures of the children and they've got some lovely children together.
Yeah, it sounds like you just hope. But I said for anybody, I'm always a believer. You don't want to see people unhappy. And I said, good luck to them. Okay, good luck to the family. My philosophy with that, definitely so. Now I've got to ask you, Amanda. Obviously, it's very hard to approach books. This one. Was there anything you didn't particularly like about this book?
It took some getting used to just because it was in the different format that I was talking about. But by the end of it, I was thinking, well, yeah, it's just capturing little parts of his life, just those moments where he just sees something or someone says something to him and then he realizes something. I think that is part of what poetry is about. It doesn't matter what format you put it in.
Yeah, I agree with you completely on that. So good luck to him in the book, definitely. So with that one. Now, when did you first hear about him being a poet?
I knew years ago, I'd seen it somewhere. I don't know if he'd mentioned it on social media or I'd read an article, but I'd never seen any poetry. And then I think we were doing our research in Waterstones, where we're going to Waterstones, look at books, and then find them cheaper somewhere else.
Or get them through alternative revenue streams.
And I actually found myself looking at this book, which had a really nice cover. It took me about 10 seconds to click. I thought, that looks like a nice poetry book. It's a nice cover on that. And then I read Misha Collins on it. I was like, what? So I picked it up and I'm like wearing it in front of me, like, look at this.
Yeah. And then it's worth knowing, obviously, like I said, it's that one mysteriously jumped into my basket a couple of years later in time for Valentine's Day, because I know if everyone obviously knows Amanda does like Misha Collins a lot. Is that the best way of putting it, Amanda, to you? That's why. So it jumped into your basket, and that's why. But I thought you'd enjoy it. It is. So now, is there anything we need to bring up about this book, Amanda, before we conclude?
No, there's nothing else. I'm ready to give it a score.
What are you going to give this out of 10? I'll be surprised if this is not a recommendation.
I'm giving it 9 out of 10.
Oh, high recommendation. Sounds good to me. That's excellent stuff. Then that means that it's a strong recommendation. Amanda's really enjoyed it. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Good. Okay then. Me next, isn't it? So.
Yeah, and I think we have to say goodbye to anybody who doesn't have a strong stomach now, don't we? Because it's all downhill from here.
Yeah, it will get a bit dark in this bit now, to answer yourself. So I'm not going to give any hints away on this, Amanda, because obviously we have to do a legal disclaimer now. The rest of this podcast is on heavy adult material. It's definitely not suitable for everybody. So, right, Amanda, should we conclude?
Yeah.
Give everybody your childlike wave then. Say bye.
Bye.
Reading in bed.
Welcome back to Reading in Bed with Andy N and who am I?
Amanda N. No, is it Amanda C, Amanda N, or Amanda Nicholson, Amanda Steele? I don't bloody know.
Who's Amanda C? Why would there be a C?
I'm just bugging in letters out. That's why. So just to confuse you. Now, obviously, whose turn is it now, Amanda? You're next. I'm now. Okay, so yeah, as we stated before, anybody still listen to this, The next 3 books in today's session are of adult material, so parental discretion is advised. Now, what do you want to know first of all, Amanda?
The title and the author.
Okay, I'm on the current book by Paul Auster today, which came out the back end of last year, called Burning Boy.
Okay, do you want to read the blurb?
Yes, I do. It's a bit of a longer blurb, this, okay?
Okay.
But yeah, I'll read it, okay? The blurb is, Booker Prize shortlisted in New York Times best-selling author Paul Auster's comprehensive landmark biography of the great American writer Stephen Crane. With Burning Boy, celebrated novelist Paul Auster tells the extraordinary story of Stephen Crane, best known as the author of The Red Badge of Courage, who transformed American literature through an avalanche of original short stories, novellas, poems, journalism, and war reportage, for his life was cut short by tuberculosis at age 28. Auster's probing account of his singular life covers Crane as he rebounds from one perilous situation to the next. A controversial article written at 20 disrupts the course of the 1892 presidential campaign. A public battle with the New York Police Department over the false arrest of a prostitute effectively exiles him from the city. A star-crossed love affair with an unhappily married uptown girl tortures him. A common law marriage to the proprietors of Jacksonville's most elegant boarding house endures. A shipwreck results in his near drowning. He withstands enemy fire to send up dispatches in the Spanish-American War. And then he relocates to England, where Joseph Conrad becomes his closest friend, and Henry James weeps over his tragic early death. In Burning Boy, Auster not only puts forward an immense read about an unforgettable life, but also casts a dazzled eye on Crane's astonishing originality and productivity, providing a skewedly knowing insight into Crane's creative process to produce the rarest of reading experiences. The dramatic biography of a brilliant writer as only another literature master could tell it.
Okay. So what made you want to read this book then?
Well, you know, anybody who knows me and also know Reading Bed, I love Paul Auster's work. He's one of the rare modern writers, really, that's jumped around all kinds of genres. He's done what I think is 14 novels. He's done poetry books. He's done screenplays, directed films. He's done numerous books, non-fiction. But this is the first time that I can think of he's actually done a biography on another writer. And this one was, I know he first started reading about this guy, basically, when he was in college himself 40 years ago. And it took him about 40 years to actually have the guts to go and write this book, basically.
Okay, so do you want to talk about any good points?
Yeah, now, people wondering, obviously, reading in bed, they would know. I reviewed Auster's last book. Was it a couple of years ago, Amanda, wasn't it? 4321.
Yeah, we're always fighting off burglars with his books.
No, his last two, and this one and the last one, certainly. His other book from or lighter. 4321 was, if the memory correct, was 850 pages. Yes, in hardback. So it's not like the sort of book I could carry on the Kindle to work. Because I had the pleasure of reading this at home, and 4321, where I read it over lockdown when I was in a cricket ground at the back of us over about a month. This one, I read it at home over about 3 months. It took me 3 months to build, or a month to build the guts up to read this one, because it's so long. And you think, Amanda, let me ask you a question then, because I know you've read 1 or 2 books, haven't you, that are over 1,000 pages, 800 up. What's the experience like for you with that then, first of all, then?
Well, the one that comes to mind is The Stand, and that was an audio book, but as a physical hardback, I think that would be quite hefty carrying it around.
Yeah, so this was out of flat, basically. And it was, you think really, Amanda, with this one, the book guy wrote about Stephen Crane, he barely lived into the 20th century. I think he died round about his birthday a couple of days before. So to go and do an 800-page novel on his a guy that barely lived, really, you can argue, at 28, it's ambitious, isn't it? Certainly.
Yeah, I don't think I've probably have about 20 pages to put in a novel about me at the age of 28.
Probably about the same as me as well. Most of my pub stories as well. So yeah, but like I said, it was I was before we started this, and I knew his 2 most famous books which are both covered in quite some depth in this. Maggie, A Girl of the Streets, and The Red Badge of Courage, which I will be reviewing at a later date in Reading in Bed. I'll tell you that now, okay? But what I certainly wasn't aware of a lot of his other work. And like, you got from the bio, didn't you? Like, he lived a heck of a life, really, serving as a war correspondent in Greece and Cuba. And he like barely survived a shipwreck and all kinds of scandals up in his life. It's like Auster basically he examined every single work of his he's done throughout his life and talks about his life and top in quite some detail. And what's interesting in this book, Amanda, is really is you're writing books. Like, what's the longest book you've done so far today? I'm going to have to ask you about yours now as well.
Oh, about maybe 200-300 pages.
Of words?
Yeah, it's not flash fiction books, yeah.
Now, seriously, okay, with this one, Auster apparently wrote this in 18 months, would you believe?
Yeah. I suppose if that's your full-time job, though, and you've got nothing else to do when you actually make a full-time living from writing fiction books, it's doable.
Yeah, I believe that he wrote this was his lockdown book challenge. I heard this. I did hear talk of this when he had a break after doing 4, 3, 2, 1, and then went into this then. But it's fascinating with this book because 4, 3, 2, 1 was set in America, and from the end of the American Civil War right up into the 1890s. So there is parallels between Crane's life and 4, 3, 2, 1. And I've read all those books, and this definitely feels like, you know what I mean, where you can feel like you see where his influence come from his previous book. That's why. So, but it was like, if I'm honest, I don't know a writer. Right, possibly Stephen King might have managed this, but there's not a lot of authors that have the guts to go and do this, to actually spend 18 months writing a book. This was pretty frankly amazing. It is. And it's heartfelt and very witty. And you never cease to feel this kid also is in awe of Crane. It feels like this all along. And I didn't realise this until I've nearly finished the book off, that Crane hadn't really been taught in schools in America for years and probably been forgotten a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, I said, but I've got to be careful. It's like, the reason why this is on the adult side of it, because I've told you what Maggie, A Girl of the Streets is about, Amanda, haven't I?
Yeah.
Right, well, I've got to talk about a bit about both those two books. The Red Badge of Courage is his anti-war book. It's pretty brutal. It's not an easy book to read. And Maggie, A Girl of the Streets is about a prostitute in New York. And there's talk around. Did I tell you about this before, Amanda, where it's meant to be based on somebody you knew?
No, you didn't tell me that.
Yeah, it's been rumoured to be based on some woman he knew, basically had an affair with, that was apparently going back to his house every Saturday night. And sometimes he's out playing cards and come back home and find her asleep in his bed.
Oh, that's nice.
I know. That's what I mean. But Maggie, The Girl of the Streets, is very, very full on. And I'll talk about this more in Reading in Bed because but there is a scene in the book where Maggie's mum gets kicked to death by a pimp for not doing enough work. Yeah, and it's full on. He talks about the body on the floor, and she's been this guy, pimp's literally kicked her to death probably over about half an hour, kept putting the boot in till she come and she died. But the book itself is full of very graphic, quite graphic, frantic, disturbing scenes like that. Yeah. So like it's got to be read with caution, that book. And Red Badge of Courage is not less, it's more brutal. So I said, but it kind of surprised my Auster's obsessed with this sort of writing, because it's quite different to what he does. His writing's very, it's the same sort of cleverness, but the brutality is not there, certainly.
Yeah.
Right, okay, Amanda, that's my strong points.
Okay, so do you want to move on to the weak points?
What do you reckon my weak points are?
Probably exactly the same as the strong points.
No, it's too long.
Yeah.
You tell me, honestly, like, I've got to be honest with you, Auster has put an apology out for this book, as with 4, 3, 2, 1 over the length of them. And I thought to myself, he probably should have had an editor to tend to cut it down, to be honest with you. Because it's when you're doing books like that, you're only going to get your real hardcore fans reading them, aren't you?
Yeah, but I think when you get to the point where you become known for books like that, if you release something shorter, people will be like, oh, is that all it is? Where's the rest of it?
But he's done very short books before. There's a book in our bookcase called Timbuktu about a talking dog. And that's all right. That's under 200 pages.
That
So it's
sounds
not,
good, actually. I like talking dogs.
I know you do. Well, it's ironic. We've already done about talking dog already. So, but I might review that one again sometime. I might dig it up and let you read it. We'll both review it together. It's interesting. It's a good little book, that one. But this, like I said, this feels to me like it's an author in his 70s now, where he's got nothing left to prove, and he's just writing what he wants to write. And he's like, it's probably very hard for a publisher to say, no, Paul, cut it back by about 200 pages, because he won't do it.
Yeah, and providing he hasn't done anything crazy, he's probably financially okay, so he's got nothing to worry about.
Yeah, he's interesting with him, really, because his wife's a novelist as well, best-selling novelist, and the daughter's a jazz singer who's done a couple of albums. So he's like I said, it's a bit of an interesting family, really. So, but yeah, it's a fascinating book, but it's too long. It didn't drag, but it should have been cut down, I think, a bit to the series itself. But anyway, that's all my comments.
So what's your score out of 10?
What do you think I'm going to do here, then?
I think it's going to be at least an 8 or 9.
I'm giving it 9 out of 10. It's a fantastic book. It was a pleasure reading it. I knew of Crane, but I didn't know his work before this, and I'm now reading 2 of his books at the moment. Not at the same time, of course. My wandering eyes, there were 2 books at the same time, but I've got a couple on the Kindle I'm going through. So yeah, it's interesting. I enjoyed it. Right, Amanda. Right, now we talked about prostitution and brutality.
Now we're going to lay into social media, aren't we? Which is my favourite thing to do. Yeah.
In a somewhat darker way. I think that's the best way of putting it, isn't it? So, and then if you think we've done a bleak book first, you ain't seen nothing yet. So,
I'm not going to start singing that.
no, I wouldn't either. We'll see you in a minute, okay? Say bye, Amanda.
Bye.
Reading and bed.
Hi, guys. Yes, Reading in Bed, episode 59. She is Amanda Nicholson.
And he is Andy N.
Right, yes. Now, as we said before, we're into the adult section of the podcast. This is a very disturbing book we're going to read next. And I'm going to be quite serious as best we can, Amanda, really, aren't we? So, like I said, so the book itself is by, and I can't find the name, my laptop's frozen. Hayley Phelan, Like Me. And this book, I do need to state, did your copy have this, Amanda, as well? It had an explicit warning right at the front of the book.
I can't remember.
Yeah, mine definitely.
I eat those for breakfast.
Oh, well, we know that by now. Anybody's wondering, Amanda, if she starts seeing adult warnings from a TV program, she starts cheering normally.
Yeah, I usually think they're trying to seduce me or something.
But seriously, okay, we do have to be quite serious to a degree.
Yeah.
Okay? Like I said, we will take the piss of this book to a degree, but it is, well, one of the most, how do you say it, man? One of the most eye-opening books you've done for a while, this one.
I think there's a touch of realism to it if you look into like the seedy world of modelling and Instagram and the effect it's had on it.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, I better read the blurb out before we start.
Yeah.
So, Like Me. Oh, I knew he'd asked me to do this. Well, I'm not even going to read the bit black in it, because the black bit I can't pronounce half the words. So I'll just cut out the first black. It's a kind of psychological thriller that follows an aspiring model down a social media-fueled rabbit hole of obsession, narcissism, and self-destruction. For 19-year-old Mickey, Instagram offers a tantalizing portal into the world she wishes she inhabited. Few beautiful, cunning, and privileged Mickey finds herself with a stalling modelling career, an escalating drinking problem, few friends, and next to nothing in the bank. To numb her growing despair, she spends her days frantically refreshing her Instagram feed, obsessively tracking the movements of Insta-famous model Gemma Anton. Gemma is a perfected version of Mickey, living a seemingly perfect life, a skyrocketing career, a famous photographer friend, and adoring foddlers. Foddlers then. Foddlers. So, the life Mickey wants more than anything else herself. She studies every detail Gemma offers through the window of her phone, trying to establish, learn, mimic, become the object of her growing fascination. Then a chance encounter thrusts Mickey into a world of opportunity, and she meets with surprising and immediate success. But as her online persona begins to take over her life, Mickey finds it increasingly difficult to separate reality from the facade of Instagram. Engrossing, sharp, and astute, Like Me is a shimmering portrait of information, disconnection, identity in the digital age, and a dazzling introduction to a brilliant new voice in contemporary literature. Right, Amanda, I'm going to let you start off with this one. Okay, tell us a little bit what you liked about the book to begin with.
Yeah, so I was drawn into it because of the Instagram handle, the handle on it, because obviously I'm interested in stuff like that that looks at like the dark side of it, because I think there is a very dark side to it that a lot of people either don't talk about, or if they do talk about, it's usually, people then they just go off or they commit suicide because of it and stuff like that.
Yeah, I do you know what it reminded me of in the first part of the book was, I actually initially thought it was actually going to become like single white female. Can you remember that film with Bridget Fonda in from years ago?
I've heard of it, but I never watched it.
Yeah, it initially started off in that direction when she basically took over her life. And I thought this was going to go that direction, and it did in a way. But like it obviously then we end up with Nikki bumping into Gemma in a nightclub, and then everything seems to go pretty mad, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Now, my favourite bit of this book really was, and I want to know what your favourite bit it was as well, when it talks about social obsession and the danger of social media, and Instagram in particular. And I was kind of surprised she got away with writing this book, because I'm surprised Instagram didn't sue her.
Yeah, but I suppose you just got to prove that, there is things like that, and they are, so it's easily proven.
Yeah, it's true. I like the fact where she was getting obsessed, wasn't she? More likes. I must have more comments, more likes. Next step, another picture, more likes, more comments. It was like...
And there's so many people on Instagram now, and I mean, I know there's other social media platforms, but I think that's the main one that's really setting it off. And they're just obsessed with it. And that's all they do all day, just post pictures of themselves, like not wearing very much, pouting, just like having a certain look, the bones sticking out, and still not thinking they're skinny enough.
Yeah, that's what this book at its best really touched on. And certainly, like, it was... How did you feel about the sex scenes in it? It was...
I don't think they were overly graphic, to be honest.
Yeah, it was...
I've seen and read worse in other books and films and things.
Yeah, this is what's causing the controversy on the sex scene. It was basically, there was a scene in it when she got press gowned having sex with the photographer, when she was basically saying she wasn't turned on and she just fucked him anyway, like, because she felt she had to. Then she effectively got raped, didn't she, later on by some cowboy guy or something.
Yeah, but I think there's so much of that in real life, not just in modelling, but just in like the film industry and stuff. So it's like, even though it's fiction, if it highlights that in some way, then I think it's a good thing, because people need to know that goes on.
Yeah, no, I agree. That was one of the books that is best for me. Now, let's have a look. Check. Yeah. Otherwise, I mean, that covers all my strengths of the book, really. So now, is there anything you particularly liked about this book, Amanda, before we go into weaknesses?
I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but there was a sort of twist, but I figured it out halfway through the book.
Yeah.
I thought it was done quite well, because by the time we got halfway through the book, I was thinking, I think this is what's going to happen, and it did.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Okay, we better go into weaknesses then, I suppose, hadn't we? So,
Yeah.
Is there anything that you particularly disliked about this book? And I've got 2 points to raise on it, do you understand?
There was a few, but it's probably not the same things as you. I think it was a bit slow in places. And the mother character, I know, like, maybe that's just the way she was, but it just felt like she didn't really care at all. And she didn't see what was happening to her daughter right in front of her.
Yeah. I've read up on comments in this book, Goodreads and a few websites, and how did you feel about the main character, Nikki? Did you find her quite unsympathetic?
I kind of see like how she got to where she was. I can't relate to her, obviously, because I've not been like that, and I'm lucky enough in a way that I grew up with